السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. صباح الخيرات. We have a special session today. We'll be conducting the session in English. For my guest speaker is a Muslim American, and I'm hoping that we have a new audience joining us, English speakers or who prefer to reach out to children via English language. I will invite my guest and then we'll start the session inshallah. Mrs. Hashimi, أهلا وسهلا. طيب في بعض التعليقات جاتنا ليش باللغة الإنجليزية؟ ليش لا مو باللغة الإنجليزية؟ في مسلمين يتحدثون باللغة الإنجليزية. وعليكم السلام. How are you, Mrs. Hashimi? إن شاء الله بخير.
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. I was just explaining to the audience, some of them asking why we are conducting this session in English. And I was just explaining that Muslim speaks many languages and one of them is the Muslim Americans. So the reason I also was very much confident into hosting the session in English is that we have a big segment in Saudi Arabia as well, in other Arabic countries, whom children go to international schools and all the materials and the resources they deal with the children is in English, in fact. And I've noticed recently a trend in our society that whenever there is a social gathering, people are mostly speaking a new language, which is something between Arabic and English. So welcome on our show, Mrs. Hashimi, and I look forward to have a wonderful session with you.
Thank you.
Welcome. And I have to also explain that we are hosting the session in a peculiar time, other than the times that we usually host the session in because of the time difference. You are in California, right?
I'm in Washington, but yes, it's
okay,
that
so
same
closer.
time zone.
Okay, so that because of the time difference. So Mrs. Hashimi is a certified teacher, narrator, and storyteller, podcast presenter. She's the founder of Once Upon a Crescent, which is a podcast for children. She's passionate about writing, narrating Muslim kids' stories, and she's a former school teacher, elementary level in the United States, and stay-at-home mom for 3 wonderful children, mashallah, tabarakallah. Welcome again, Amir. Let's start.
Thank you. Yes,
I would like to set the foundation for this session and showing the reason why you are my guest is because of your podcast platform called Once Upon a Crescent. And if you can tell us a little bit the reason that you established that platform.
Yes, definitely. It kind of stems back to when the pandemic first started. My son, right now he's 9. So when the pandemic started, he would hear these bedtime stories like on Google Podcasts. And it was like one of these resources that we were like, oh, it's a good way to wind down. And someone we knew was listening to the stories. So he would listen to the American storyteller with her original stories. And my son was picking up on all of these little things, like very subtle things about American culture. And then he would come and ask me about it, like, oh, what is Halloween? And how come we don't celebrate Halloween? And, what's Valentine's Day? And why do some people have a stepdad or a stepmom? So he had such a curious mind, and he would come back to me with his questions, and it always caught me off guard because I always felt like, it was kind of like an encroachment, like, someone else is planting these little ideas about American culture that I wasn't ready to address yet. So I was never prepared to talk about how different we are and how we don't do that. So I always had to stumble across my words. But mostly I started it because my son was really in tune with the stories. He retained all of it. And he thought it was really funny and entertaining. And there was a twinge of jealousy in me. I was like, ugh, if somebody else is entertaining my kid, why can't I do that? So I definitely wanted to start something. And I even said out loud to my husband, I was like, it would be cool if there was a Muslim podcast where American Muslim kids had these shared experiences and they heard stories about themselves. So I definitely had that motivation, and the pandemic helped because we were all home and I had like kind of like these creative juices flowing. I've always loved writing. And with the help of my sister-in-law, she's on Instagram as well. She has a parenting page called the Dr. Mommy, and she helped me establish like this platform for Muslim kids. So alhamdulillah, it's been good. It's been really well received.
Yes, and I would like to shed the light on a fact. I'm not gonna add an adjective to that fact. I let the audience choose the adjective of their own. Is that now with globalization and modern technology, the challenge that you faced with your son is the challenge that every parent in the Muslim world faces today. These topics are now being, what you call it, the day-to-day facts that they live, and we're not equipped as a parent to deal with it. We're living in the Western society in our own home, regardless of our geographic location. And because we are not raised in the Western world, we're not equipped and ready to understand how we coexist with these ideologies and these concepts. We can't explain it, nor we can manage it or deal with it. So your podcast is a solution not only to children who Muslim children who lives in the Western culture, but as well as in the whole globe at the moment, because now the whole world is now like a small village, and our children asking about not only Halloween, but Christmas and Jesus, and why a family is consisting of two moms, and etc. Why you wear hijab to your work and others don't. So these are now becoming common questions that we need to be prepared for. When we were preparing for this lecture and you suggested the title, Connecting to Children Through Stories, I genuinely wanted to broaden that and make the connection through stories as a tool to solve a bigger challenge, which you just, what was the inspiration behind you creating this podcast. Thank you very much.
Yes. Oh, and yes, and I definitely wanted to add that, with stories, me and my son were able to connect better. And it wasn't like I was lecturing him. Sometimes when we're trying to connect with our kids, it's like a one-way conversation. We're talking as parents, we're talking and talking, and we don't know if our child is actually like extracting that valuable information. So I always felt like doing it through a story helped to create a level of engagement. He would ask me questions even after my story was done. He would ask like, oh, what happens next? Why didn't he say this? And why didn't he do that? So it was kind of like a window into his mind about what he sees within the story and how he connects to the struggles of a 9-year-old boy just like him. And what would he do if he was in that situation? And those were the things he was finally expressing. And I think that was such a open door for more conversation and more connection. And it felt like an authentic like bond. Like it wasn't just me talking, he was telling me stuff now.
Amazing. And what I like about this platform in specific, Mrs. Hashimi, is that I see it as a way of you as a mother being proactive into dealing with the challenge that you faced, and you coming up with a mean that is a genuine connection and what you call it, an authentic communication tools to children that is suitable to their age, rather than we live in the reality. Whenever we as a parent faces a challenge, we say, what can I do? This is the reality. This is the new trend, and we feel helpless. But now I see Once Upon a Crescent in a completely different light, that it is what you call it, an experience or a trial from a mom to find a solution to something that her children needed, which I encourage all our audience to think outside the box rather than to feel what you call it at the receiving end, but become proactive. So thank you very much for that. So can you take us through how the children reacted to the different stories that you had, and if you can really take us on a specific subject, like for example hijab, dealing with COVID, and etc.
Oh, for sure. So what I would do is I would just like really observe my kids. I would listen to their dialogue within, my son and his little brother, and then I would just try to like figure out what is it that he needs help with. Where can I guide him without lecturing him? So one thing was like he had like these anxious tendencies where everything was a what if. What if this happens? Or what if this person gets COVID? Or what if the park is closed? Or what if we don't get to see our friends? And everything was a what if. And subhanAllah, it made me think about like how my mom would always say, we have to trust in Allah's plan, qadar Allah. If it doesn't happen, then we know that Allah has a different plan for us. So in one of my stories, a little boy wants to go to a playground and he's like, prepared for it and he's determined to explore that playground, but on the way there, the street is closed, so they aren't able to go to that playground. They have to go all the way across the neighborhood, and they end up at a completely different playground. And he's really disappointed. This little boy is very disappointed, just like my son would be. Like literally verbatim, the words he would say, I just put that in the story. I was like, this is what kids sound like. Even if it's like big emotions, even if they're frustrated, this is how they sound like. And during that story, what happens is they come back home and they realize that the street was closed because there was a car accident right at the playground that he wanted to go to. And the takeaway is, we plan and we plan, but Allah is the best of planners. And these are really heavy, big, like we think these are heavy text from Quran, but really they're relatable for kids. They really are. I had a mom message me on Instagram talking about how her son, who is just 5 years old, was observing his parents' frustration over a pizza order that didn't get right. Like they went to a restaurant, the pizza had some topping and his parents were frustrated. And this little boy who's 5 years old, he says to his parents, like, maybe Allah wanted that to happen. What if we got sick if we got the original pizza order? And his mom messaged me and she was telling me about that. She was like, he's 5 and he understood that whatever alternative path or plan is from Allah. And that really touched my heart. And I think that the value of the stories is that the kids are retaining the lesson. Because another mom on Instagram, she shared how her husband, like one of his special days, it was like Eid or something, and he wanted to make a card for his dad. And the idea of making a handwritten card came from one of my stories that he had listened to just 2 days before. So he put in like the effort and he decorated it. And it's amazing to me that an idea that I plant in a story is being embodied in real life through kids. Like it's just a story, but kids are acting upon it. And that's what I feel like is one thing that parents could take away. Like your kids will extract lessons.
But also, if we're talking in terms of embodiment, the way you write the story, there is also a message for the parents who are portrayed in the story itself, how we speak to the children in a more gentler voice, right? Like
Yes.
parents in the story are modeling a dialogue that should take place in reality.
Absolutely. And I think that's what's so funny because in real life, I always think about back to certain situations and think, oh, I wish I spoke to my son this way. I could have said this. I could have gave him more physical attention. I could have touched him. I could have hugged him. I could have rubbed his back. And all of these like reflections come to me when I craft a story. So I make sure that in this imaginary world of stories, my parents, they hit these points. They do the eye contact. They get on level for the child and speak in a way where I would have wanted to. So it's funny because a lot of parents also tell me that their kids tell them, why can't you sound like Mrs. Hashmi? And so I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't mean for that to happen, but it's kind of like an ideal mark that I hope to get to one day.
Inshallah. And writing these stories for the podcast that was stemming from real life experience with your children or your network suggesting the topic, you will need you how I can say it, you needed to really see the topic from the kid's lens and then embody the what you call it, more compassionate parent role, right?
Yes, exactly. And I
So,
think that the hijab story kind of reflects that. The Baba's hijab help. You know, with that story, I really wanted to go against the grain of how we see men, and I really wanted to embody that warmth from a fatherly figure. You know, again, thinking back to what could I have done or what would I have wanted as a little girl, or if I was a little girl, I kind of reflect on that. What would I have wanted to hear? And so I definitely think that that is some like an insight. It's a tool for me to craft a better story for the audience.
okay, and you said to me when we're preparing for this session is that going through this process of seeing things from the kid's lens had a positive effect on your parenting as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's empathy, right? At the end of the day, if you can put yourself in your child's shoes and you can see the world from their little limited self, right? You know, they just live in this moment. To them, that broken toy is devastating. To them, to rush them, to get them to praise Allah when they're literally in the middle of looking for something. And like the story, the lost Lego, the kid is in the middle of trying to find this one specific piece of for his toys, and he just can't transition from his focused task to another task. And instead of taking offense, the mother didn't like, shame him and say, I can't believe you said that. You're not going to pray right now. She understood his lens, like, oh, he's trying to look for a toy. Let's address that and then we can move forward. So she also doesn't take it personally. She says, okay, how about this? We come up with a plan. We'll pray. We'll look for it together. And I think that hearing that for a parent's perspective, it kind of gives you this inspiration that, okay, next time my son or my daughter is in the middle of something, I can come up with a plan with them. I just have to acknowledge what they're doing before rushing them to do the next task.
But I'm sure in doing so, you are focusing on the child, not focusing on the result or the outcome or the task or even
Yeah.
time passing. And I think shifting the focus from whatever is taking place and put it on the child will always help us really be calmer and deal with the situation that is benefiting the child rather than accomplishing the task. And I love
Yeah.
that in as a, what you call it, as one of the angles that you assert again in the podcast. When I heard to the podcast, what is the one on Eid? It's called Picture Eid. No, what is it called?
An epic Eid, the recent one.
Yeah, the recent one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I felt like I'm lost in time, lost not in a negative sense, like as if I entered a vortex that is only focusing on that incident, and there is nothing matter, not a bedtime that we have to adhere to or the wake up in the morning. It's just that child at that moment was the main focus. And I think this is how all parents should really deal with every single situation, because as parent, I think guiding them through life is our main task.
Yes, absolutely. And
And
when you said that, sorry, I interrupted you. When you said that, it kind of reminded me about how sometimes we have like really unrealistic expectations for our child, right? Like we hold things against them. We think, oh, why didn't he do this? Why couldn't he do that? But in reality, like it's unrealistic. It's unreasonable to expect that because a child, he's just innocently playing and innocently reacting just impulsively. There's no true malice. There's no ill intent. Even when I look at my kids and I see like my son when he gets when he's having like this rough day, and I can tell to some degree he's trying to keep it in. He's trying to be in control, and then when he loses it, he loses it. Either I can punish him for those feelings, or I can, sit with him and walk him through it. Like, okay, here's what you're feeling, and let's do something about it, versus shaming him for it. And I think some of the parents in my stories do that. They just sit with the feeling for a little longer. And I strive to do that. Honestly, I'm still working on that.
But I think I see that takes us again to the fundamental of parenting. If a parent focuses on achieving what's on the itinerary for the day, or what is the expectation of today from the children. You have to brush your teeth, you have to pray, you have to be in school, you have to get on the education platform, whatever. Then automatically our energy will be geared toward achieving those tasks. But if I saw the child in my life as a teacher as well for me, as I am a guider for them, so whatever situation arises, new feeling, situation out of control, a new curious question, it's for me to learn as well for them. So I think resilience and flexibility will be part of the agenda. There is something in it for me as a parent with that child. And I'm really curious as well as that child to learn more. I'm sure that not every topic that you addressed in your stories is something that you had the previous knowledge of and you had to research or to find the answer. Is that true, or you got it all?
Yes. No, it definitely is true. Like it's some of the story, like I personally don't have I don't have a daughter who wears hijab. I have a daughter who's 2, but she's not at that age group where she wears hijab. But there are certain times where I have to exit my role as an adult and have to enter this young lens. Like what do they feel? And even in like psychology, they say that kids, they think whatever's happening is magnified. Like everything is so magnified for them. So in a way, I did have to kind of learn about child psychology, like what goes on in their brain and why do they do the things they do to help me with these stories. So there was more thought into it in that sense.
Amazing. And now my children are very grown up. They're adults on their own terms. But I'm imagining if while raising them, I enacted their world while I'm dealing with the situation, it will be a more fun journey than what we most parent at the moment geared towards. It feels draining, but if we went to their level and try to see the world from their eyes, it will be more adventurous and more fun, I think.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Even my 4-year-old, I have a 4-year-old son. When we're leaving out the door and we're trying to get somewhere, he takes his fine time and he's just staring at the flowers on the ground. And it's such an innocent thing. And he'll crouch down and he'll pick up a ladybug. He'll find the ladybug and he's like so intensely focused, and he'll say, "Oh, Mama, you like ladybugs. That's what I was looking at." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." And I was just about to get irritated. But subhanAllah, look at him. He's trying to connect with me. He's just in his own little bubble. So I think that, creating like this mental, like a pause button, like, okay, what's going on with them? What's happening before you react? And I think that's a new philosophy that we see on Instagram too, about how to be more in control of our emotions so that we can be our best self.
Amazing. And in creating such podcast stories, I'm sure there is a certain objective in mind or wishes that you'd like to hope for, to achieve.
Oh yeah, for sure. I did have a template. I found like these mindsets, how to instill and create a certain mindset or introduce a mindset in children. And it's called the 7 mindsets. And I started off thinking, okay, I'm going to make a story out of each of these mindsets. One of them is pursue your passion, individuality. Don't let someone box you in and say that you can't do it. You know, if you have a passion, you know, work towards it and you can achieve it. So that's one of the mindsets. Another one was a synergy, that everyone in your life can contribute to your well-being and happiness. So there was like these like, I guess like a philosophical approach to how you can nurture a child's brain. So I read through all of them and I just thought, you know, this would be a really good story. And so Sophia's science experiment is about a girl who has a talent show and she's really into science. And so she wants to do this jelly bean science experiment as her talent. And all the other girls are like doing a light show with glow sticks, and they have like this routine where they are performing in an entertaining way. And they tell her, they discourage her. They're like, okay, who's going to watch a science show? You should just join us and you can be a part of our team. So it's kind of like this tug of war between who she knows who she is and wanting to conform with other girls just because it's like a girl thing to perform versus going towards the science experiment. So, and even in one of those, I think within the story, she says, you know, but I'm me, I'm unique. And I really wanted girls, specifically little girls, to know that they don't have to follow a clique or a group. They can be perfectly them.
And you know, this is really one of the what you call it, ironic as well as what do you call it, sad reality that we live in. Muslims, whether they are in Muslim communities or in Western community, the youth Muslims, they think themselves when they choose a different path than the community that they're raised in. They see themselves as liberal and modern and whatever. In reality, they're leaving a community, the norm of a community, to join, to conform to another communities that they don't know yet about. So being
Right. I
conformist,
see what you're saying.
yeah. So and I believe that what we suffer in our Muslim society is that our youth, they don't understand these terminologies in its real essence. Like, why would you leave a community to join another community? You are confirming to them as well. So
Yeah.
looking at it from its simplest point as science or not science, that's
No,
what.
I see what you're saying. That makes sense. It kind of makes you want to dissect that further. Like, what is it about their own community that they didn't feel welcomed or belonged, or maybe there was a misconnection, like just a complete dysfunction in being connected to another person. Like maybe it's like a lost feeling that gets pushed so much so that they try to fill that void somewhere else. So it kind of makes me think, like, you know, I wonder where that stemmed from.
And in the stories that you create, these topics that you bring in, do you think the content or the what you call it, the background of it, is suitable to which age group?
Well, I definitely know that my 4-year-old, he comprehends it and he understands it. And another mom on Instagram, she tells me that her son is able to understand it and talk about it from like 4 to maybe even 10, 11. I know that past that, I'm sure it might it might not be the same pace as like the preteen age, but for sure, like these the preschool and up and elementary age groups.
I'm sure, and I think the what you call it, the generic meaning that you attach it to different topic is can be taken and expanded for different age. For example, the way you wrote about hijab, it was educational to me, even though I'm muhajjab. So adding the beauty element to hijab is something that was new to me in my age.
Oh, amazing. Oh,
So
thank you so much
really,
for sharing that.
yeah, thank you, genuinely, because I moved it from being fard, something that I had to do, to something that identify me. Now I see beauty in it, which is, I think it's a journey further step. You know, I just remembered something that I don't know if will materialize into something. My sister has a local private library in Jeddah. It's called Yuhka Anna,
Uh-huh.
which is, I think, Once Upon as well. Uh, and I think when they launched the library, we were talking about what type of segments that showed up at the library, who was subscribing to that. And she said, you know what really very noticeable is that out of 10 children, 9 they come in the library searching for books in English,
Oh,
and they're
interesting.
all speaking to me in English, asking about direction, getting instruction in English, although they are Arab Saudis living in Jeddah. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I loved the stories that you do is uses the Islamic Arabic names, Sophia, Azan, etc. So I think maybe we should find a way to collaborate to make an audio storytelling with stories that they can relate to, as well as with familiar names, because the Arabic stories, of course, you can find Ala or Safiya or Saeed, but in English, rarely you will find the Muslim Arabic names are used, and maybe we can tailor something to that.
Oh, definitely. Oh, it's funny that you say that. Actually, there's a group that I did a virtual session with them, and this one Muslima, she is here in America. She mentors young girls, and she reached out to me saying that, my these group of girls listen to your podcast. How would you feel about actually coming on to like a Zoom session and talking to them? They want to meet you, they want to see you. And this was way back in October. And I had promised them, I said, I'm going to use each and every one of your names in my future stories. So I have a list, and parents email me and, they message me saying, can you please make a story about my son, whose name is Muhammad or Isa or, so I definitely do have a list that I have to get through. And it's true, like all kids want to hear their names in an entertaining story. It's something that they can identify and connect with. So it's such a universal thing. I feel like you talking about it makes me realize how kids everywhere are like. They want to hear their relatability factor in a story.
Absolutely, and I think bringing in story content that is reviving or building in our Islamic values that is relatable to kids nowadays, talking about modern issues like Halloween and hijab in a era, sadly, that does not see hijab as the, what you call it, the norm practice.
Hmm.
I think that will be like bridging the gap between our Islamic values and Islamic beliefs and the modern world. Like, we live in this world and we can still use
Yes,
stories
yeah.
to create that bridge. Mrs. Hashimi, I would really like you to take us and the audience through examples of topics that you have addressed in the podcast. And I would love, um, I have favorites, but I'm not going to play that favorites now because I want you to be prepared, which
Yeah,
is the recent topic that you can really take us
for
through
sure.
the meanings that is attached. And although I lived in England and America for a very long time, I forgot, is Halloween coming in October or it's already
Yes,
past? It's coming in
it's in
October.
October.
Okay. And
Yeah.
without describing my feelings, we started to celebrate Halloween. So if we
Oh,
can,
okay.
yeah, so I don't know if it's one of the topics that you're prepared to address or not. So So I'm just sharing this part with you that
Yeah.
there's no exception. So you can pick and
Oh, that's
choose
that's
whatever
so
you want.
interesting to know. That is so interesting to know. And it makes me think like the type of experiences that a Muslim kid will have living in the West. One thing for sure is like the dilemma of halal, right? Gelatin. I remember as a kid, my parents would all the time, every time, make us read the ingredients because it was such like a huge thing in our household. It cannot have, gelatin. And what does a kid do sitting in the classroom? Everybody's eating gummy bears. So that's actually one of my stories, upcoming stories. Not the next one, but the one after is about a kid who faces this dilemma of his peers. He's sitting in a classroom, everybody's eating their gummy bears that has gelatin, and he like very discreetly has to figure out, does this have gelatin or not? And then he has this dilemma of, does he speak up about it and show everyone that he's the oddball who can't have a candy? So there's an internal dialogue happening within this child about, I know I'm different, but am I brave enough to do something about it with all these other kids in my classroom? So that's one of my stories. One of the themes is standing up for what you believe in. And it's so simple. And I think a lot of people can even relate to it. A lot of adults who were born and raised here can relate to that, like the halal, the halal and haram dilemma. Like, do I eat this? Do I not eat it? So I think that is definitely one of the topics that I'm going to cover. The next story, there's a theme within the story. It's actually about two girls that are twins, and they wear hijab and they go bike riding. And within the description of their experience, I make it a point to talk about how their hijab is flowing in the wind and they're enjoying their bike ride. And their brother wants them to do a challenging task on their bike. And the sister says no. And within my dialogue, I try to emphasize that, no means no. If someone says no, you don't push them, don't force them. So the sister reminds her brother that, oh, she's not comfortable doing this risky move on her bike. She already said no. So I kind of plant things here and there, to try to convey these messages about the power of your voice or the dilemma you will face even as a child. So it's definitely these themes that I have in mind. I've jotted it down for my future stories.
Excellent. And the way that parents can have access to these stories via subscriptions on multiple platforms, right?
Yeah, so if you listen to any podcast on iTunes, it's on iTunes, it's on Google Podcast, or even if you don't have any podcast player app, you can just go on the website, mrshashmi.com, and all of my audio stories are uploaded there with the description. So anything that may sound appealing to, the children, they can always choose, like, oh, I want this story with this name. I try to make the child's name or the character name as one of the titles, so it's more appealing. Like, oh, this one has Hamza in it, or this one has the name Izan. So hopefully they can choose which one is appealing to them.
Okay, and you said it's available on multiple platforms. And what would be the ideal setup for it? Do you encourage parents to have a sit down with their children, or the child can listen to it on their own?
Yeah, so I've had both sets of experiences. Some parents tell me that they play it in their child's room through the Google app, or sorry, the Google device or the Alexa device. They'll play it, and then the child listens to the story, and the next one will come on, and the next one until the child is asleep. So it's part of a lot of people's bedtime routine. Some parents have said that they listen to it with their kids in a car ride. So if they put it on their phone, it's like within the car ride on the way to school or wherever. So they're able to connect. And I love that one because the parent is in tune with the story too. So you can always go back and ask about it. So there's different ways people use the stories. I hope that they use it in a way where parents are definitely involved as well.
Okay, I'm just trying to play the what you call the next step in my head, and I something popping in my mind I would like to share with you. Imagine if some of the audience, whether they're the ones with us or the ones that are gonna watch the episode later on, decided to do that and play the podcast with the children. I would like to know if you think if they're not conscious, active, compassionate parent, do you think if the child listened to it on his or her own, then they will realize that there is the mother or the father in the story is better than the one I have. So I'm just thinking about that in my mind
Yeah,
because
it's interesting. Yeah.
yes,
Actually, one of the girls in the mentor group that I was mentioning to you, when I was talking to them, the little girls, she was like, "I my favorite story is Baba's hijab help, but my Baba would never do that." And she said it in such a sad tone because you could tell that she's yearning for that kind of relationship, but in reality, she doesn't have that at home. But you know, kids do pick up on it for sure. Even my kids will pick up on it. They'll tell me, they'll say, you know, Mama, you don't do this all the time with us. Sometimes you get mad at us and sometimes you're yelling at us. I'm like, I know.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
But the reason I shared that with you live is I would like to encourage parents to listen to the podcast and learn, adapt to that parenting style, even if it's happening gradually. So
Yeah.
even if the child identify the gap or the difference between the parents in those stories and in real life, that will be eventually narrowed down or closed
Absolutely, absolutely.
eventually.
And you know, as the writer of these stories, every single time I have to write the parents part, I always incorporate more physical touch than I do in real life because that's where I want to be. I want to be,
Amazing.
yeah, I want to be more, I want to give out more warmth. You know, I want to give more hugs. I want to give more cuddles. And that's my deficit as a parent. So I try to project that, you know, where I'm lacking. And, you know, it makes me think about even how the Prophet ﷺ, his advice was, don't get mad, don't get mad, don't get mad, right? And it's such it applies to parenting, you know, through and through. Like just stop and listen. Just try to figure out what's going on before you get mad. And subhanAllah, it is so much harder in real life, but just that awareness, that spark means that you're doing better than yesterday.
Definitely. So then let us recommend that before parents play those podcasts to children, which we are encouraging them to do so because it is a bridging podcast, meaning we live in a society now that has a lot of new topics and new trends and challenges, us as a Muslim community, and we needed to really connect to children with these topics. But listen to it so you can really model and try to replicate the parenting style in those stories eventually, gradually, so your child does not see you as the bad cop and that parent in the story is the ideal fairy tale parent as
Yeah.
well.
And before we move on to the next topic, I do want to say that one of the parents who responded back to me, if there was one story about the Lego where Hamza's, I think I can't recall the name, but it was about a Lego that a child takes from the store. Like he has this internal dialogue, he's going back and forth. And, so, you know, when I was crafting this story, I literally put in like this idea of like waswasa, like from shaitan, like shaitan justifying it. Like, oh, it's this box is already broken. What's the point? The store is going to get rid of it. You might as well look inside. And then, oh, look at that. The bag is right there. You might as well just take it. This is going to go to waste. So it's like step by step, you know, even within the child's context, like this kid is going through this tug of war internally. And when he takes the toy, he puts it in his pocket and he leaves the store, and the whole time he's so guilt ridden. He can't even stand himself. Like he's sweating, he can't think straight, and he confesses to his mom. So traditionally we think, how would a mother react to knowing that her child picked something up from a store without paying for it? So all the traditional way of doing it would be to yell and to shame and to make a huge deal out of it. And a lot of parents were saying, like, our kids noticed that you didn't have the parents do that. The parent was calm, and the parent talked about how Allah loves you even when you make mistakes. Allah is there to forgive you and delete, completely erase your sins if you just ask for forgiveness. And the child is like, you know, bewildered, like, how, what, deleted from existence? If I just, you know, repent, if I acknowledge my deed and I say astaghfirullah. And so, you know, I wanted to carve that reality versus the traditional way of lashing out and shaming. And it definitely was picked up by a lot of kids and parents. They were like, what? That doesn't happen in real life. No parent is going to say that. I actually had a parent tell me that. And I was saying, you know, it could happen either way, but this is the alternative reality. You have a way to nurture Allah's love through this mistake.
And the first step to remove that shaming and cursing and screaming at them is that we genuinely should start believing that they're not malice by nature. They're not.
Yes,
They're not bad. They
exactly.
don't have ill intention. They're just trying to explore
Exactly.
the world naively.
Yes, and it's impulsivity, right? It's like this reaction, like, you know, your fight or flight response in your brain. You think that you either have to run away or you have to combat, and it's definitely not a conscious decision. And if it was a conscious decision, you would see it in the child, right? But you never see that in kids because they're innocent. They're truly innocent. Their brains are just, you know, impulsive.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, so any other topics you'd like to explore with our audience today from the topics that you covered in the stories, or you'd like them to explore it in the podcast?
Yeah, you know, honestly, if there is one takeaway, just one message that I could impart on parents, it would be to connect with your child without any distraction. Like, look into their eyes and understand them, and like, you will feel something different. It won't be a task. You'll actually enjoy your child. You know, you'll want to be around them because they amaze you, like the things they connect with and they see. We just have to take out the time and not be so, you know, rushed like this. And I always tell my sister-in-law, I was like, you know, subhanAllah, childhood is a gift. Within your entire life, if you look at your life in a snapshot, like a movie, your childhood is one time pure innocence. Your child will never be this stage, this age again. And, you know, and they say, like, you know, I even heard that if Allah doesn't judge us until we are of puberty, you know, we are accountable, then why do we judge our children?
Definitely, and I think if you would ask me as a what you call it educationist, or what you call this platform, I'm taking two takeaways. That is, if we can shift the lens in dealing with our children, see them as pure, curious, adventurous, no ill intent, and focus on them rather than the task at hand or the situation at hand, I think there will be a massive improvement in the outcomes in bonding and connecting to each other. There will be more understanding. There will be easier to adhere to what we want to instill in them, rather than be at the odd and the friction start to come
Yes,
in the
absolutely.
engagement.
Yeah, and I feel like I have experienced that with my son. You know, we would get into these power struggles and he would just
Mm-hmm.
protest every little thing. And I realized that there's some battles that are not worth it. He wants control in his day, and why am I overly controlling every little thing? I'm missing out. I'm missing out on a peaceful interaction. I'm missing out on a moment to really connect with him. So where I can give him control, I definitely do. And when there are certain things that are like non-negotiables, I'm like, no, you have this much freedom to choose this, but these things are our house culture, our home culture. And so it was definitely a learning journey for me. And like I mentioned before, my sister-in-law's page, the Dr. Mommy, she amazing parenting page. Like subhanallah, it's a gentle approach, compassionate approach, and so many things we can connect to the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
MashaAllah. Maybe you should put a good word for us so she can be a guest, inshallah, on our platform.
Yes, definitely.
Inshallah. Well, thank you,
Inshallah.
Mrs. Hashimi, for being on our platform, and I look forward to collaborate with the library and your podcast so we can really present parents with new means and medium of connecting better to children and bridging the gap between our Muslim Islamic identity and culture, as well as modern life. Thank you
Oh,
very much.
inshallah. I pray for that too.
Inshallah.
Walaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.